Hi, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us in this Women in Tech Week. And we're delighted to be inviting you into this LinkedIn Live to be talking about dismantling career barriers for women in tech and what's the role of male allies that we can play in that. As I'm sure many of you will know, the tech industry really is at a crossroads. We've got, instances of misogyny and bias that are kind of really quite disturbing, and they seem to be being scaled up potentially. Tech bros are doubling down on all of this and saying they're done with women in tech, and they're thinking that masculine energy is the thing that we really should be focusing on, and 60-hour work weeks and all of that good stuff. So we're worried at a time also when AI is really having an impact, and we see it potentially on a path to deepen bias and widen divides. So it's never been really more important than now to have women in tech. But as we know from the Lovelace Report, actually this is a very challenging time because in the UK, for example, only 20% of tech workers are women, just maybe not even 10% are in leadership. And the Lovelace Report shows that female talent's leaving the industry. So it's costing the industry up to 3.5 billion a year. And that's really very, very concerning. So at this time, male allies have never been more critical. And as the majority of tech leaders are men, then it's really important that they show up and take responsibility to help dismantle these barriers and accelerate progress. So I'm delighted today to be welcoming our panelists to have this discussion. And we're going to be joined by, in the order I have here, Akua Opong, who is Senior EUC Engineer at LSEG and a social tech entrepreneur as well. Colm Lysat, who's VP Corporate Strategy, Hitachi Vantara. Suki Fuller, the founder of Mirabure and the winner on the 2024 Power List. And Neil Davidson, who's Head of Data Platform at Morningstar. So welcome to all of you. We're going to be diving into, in a moment, all the different aspects of how we retain women in tech. But we're also going to be talking about things like attraction, about the leadership pipeline, promotion, progression, the culture in the industry, the policies that we see in the industry, and of course, how we close the gap in AI adoption and the bias that occurs there. So kind of that's what we're aiming to address in this next hour. I want to get started by talking with you, Suki, about the Lovelace Report, which highlights the value of keeping women in tech, and yet it also highlights the exodus that we're seeing from women in the tech sector. So, what's going on here? Obviously, the Lovelace Report has highlighted unclear pathways to advancement, a lack of recognition, inadequate pay, all the things probably that you might recognize. But what's your perspective, Suki, on this challenge? And then let's get into what you think men, especially male leaders, can do to arrest this exodus.
Hi, everybody. And Robert, I gotta say, with the Lovelace Report, unfortunately, it seems like a more of the same. It's like we actually now, the only thing that's really great about the Lovelace Report, it quantifies. It actually puts it down on paper. It shows hard data, whereas before we've had all these different pieces here and there. But this actually lays it out in a nice format of what's going on. Really, it's not a pipeline problem. It's never been a pipeline problem. It's always been a power problem. And it comes down to the structures that have been built in society. They're not really made for women to work in an environment, any environment, as a matter of fact, unless it is just for females or just perceptively and whatever in perspective deemed for women. And unfortunately, when it comes down to the tech sector, we're seeing in the numbers, it really comes down to pay transparency is probably the biggest one, because you don't have the mobility if you don't know what everybody else is getting paid. Yeah. It really builds into everything. That's my opinion. It's probably, even though in the Lovelace Report it wasn't the biggest factor, but I think that's the biggest factor. It comes down to generally about the money, because if you're not moving, you're not having the career transition that you want, it really comes down to the money. You're not getting trained, comes down to the money. It's all coming down to the money. I always say that, follow the money. And for me, the Lovelace Report, that highlighted a lot of the pay discrepancies and pay disparities and the pay transparency lack of.
Right. Okay.
But I'm here to
Well,
be
let's bring.
optimistic.
Well, that's great to hear. But let's bring some of the other panelists in here on this retention point. And maybe Akua will ask you as well. I mean, what do you see in terms of the challenges around retention? Have you seen this kind of up close and personal, as it were, in the tech industry yourself?
Yeah, I would say, and hi everyone, it's great to join this panel today. But in terms of retention, I would say that at the moment the market is quite scary, and I'm not saying that word in terms of fear mongering, but I've had friends and even ex-colleagues where at the moment they're facing redundancy or they're leaving a place of work because that place is not fit for them to work in terms of the culture. They don't have the right leaders that are taking them to the next level. And
Yeah.
currently I'm in my mid stage of my career, and so seeing it, it makes it quite scary for me because let's say, for instance, if I wasn't at Elsig and I was somewhere else, would I be able to go to the next level regardless of my skills set that I bring to the workplace? And seeing this, hearing the stories, like every day I go on LinkedIn and I see someone's been made redundant, someone's leaving a workplace. And for me, more needs to be done. And even I think it was Monday or Friday last week, I posted a really, I wouldn't say it was aggressive message, but I was saying organizations need to be held accountable because what are you doing? You're seeing this day to day and you're not feeling like, oh, I should do better for my employees. You're not changing the dial. It's still the same. Oh, this person's been made redundant because of XYZ, but then later on they find out someone else has got their position. It's quite scary to think that that happens and is still continuing to happen. We can have a report with facts and figures, but it's kind of like accountability. What are organizations doing going forward to make sure they do retain women in tech and don't make it a tick box exercise? We hear that word thrown around a lot, but it's the honest truth. Not much is done. HR need to expand their horizons, and I'm going to be quite frank about it. I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat things anymore because I'm fed up of seeing it. I'm fed up of seeing some of my friends, colleagues, families like literally go through the mill where they're not treated right, where they're not being given roles that they deserve and they worked hard for. I could sit here, make everything nice and airy fairy, like it's going to get better. Yes, I want to be hopeful and be optimistic. I'm all with you, Suki, but I see too much and hear too much. The amount of times I'm on a call at the end of my day trying to convince someone to stay in tech, it literally just makes me so angry, and I have to contain it and be like, be optimistic for them and be like,
Yeah.
you know what, you've got this, but we need to change the dial.
Right. Okay. Well, let's bring in Neil and let's bring in Colm on that too, because obviously we want to get the male leader perspective. Let's start with you, Neil. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of kind of retention issues in tech? And I guess also, what do you think leaders can be doing to sort of try and arrest that decline?
Yeah, I think retention is a challenge for sure. And I think the point that Suki made about pay transparency is very important. We know that there's pay gaps that exist with reasons such as career breaks, and other systemic issues that come up. I think to boost retention, one of the key things is making sure that there's growth and development opportunities, right? And I think one of the ways that I would suggest that we attack that is really bringing a very data-driven, systematic, rubric-based approach to how we approach and how we consider growth and promotion type opportunities. Make sure that it's being done in a way that removes, or at least attempts to remove, any biases that might exist. As was pointed out, the majority of senior leadership is male, and therefore, unless we address unconscious bias within that community, it will be very difficult to kind of really address that growth blocker, if you like. So really making it very data-driven, rubric-based, scorecard-based, where personality doesn't come into it. It's more about achievement and successes and results. Okay. And if we can kind of focus in on that, then that would go some way to helping, I think.
Thank you. Let's bring in Colm to get your perspective as well. What are you seeing? I mean, you're in a different, I think, geographic landscape, as it were, but still the same issues probably of retention of women in tech. What do you think about things that are happening and need to be done?
Thanks for having me, Robert, and hi, everybody. I think in tech in particular, there's a lot of pressure to move fast, and what we lack is flexibility. And I think what can help women particularly is having a flexible arrangement and having allowances. Um, and, you know, particularly for women who have children through their career and are given options to be able to rejoin the workforce and not be discriminated against. I think Neil's point about conscious and unconscious bias is a good one. We have to make real efforts to call it out. And I'm hopeful that post-COVID, there is more workplace flexibility and tolerance, but you're already seeing people being brought back into the office and back to a 5-day week. So we'll see if that level of flexibility can be provided, because I think that does help women to manage their careers better. And of course, then the opportunities, sponsorship, advocacy, that kind of thing, they matter too.
Great, thank you. So let's circle back to Suki then. We've had a good discussion now around this retention issue. Is there anything else you wanted to add based on what you heard from the other panelists? And going back to that point about what men can do, what would you like to see more male leaders doing to help this retention point?
I think one of the big points is Colm just made about returning to the office and having more flexibility. And I think we're seeing this grand regression when it comes to that mindset. It was forced flexibility during the pandemic because of the situation. And now it seems that the mindset is, in order to have more employees that do more work, although it's statistically been proven that people actually function and do more work and better work when they're at home, but that's by the. So when it comes down to people that are women that are have children, then generally it does fall upon them to be that person that's taking care of the children. The flexibility there is more around their schedules with their children, not the flexibility that the office environment wants. So it's sort of this double-edged sword. I don't know why people are not willing to accept that flexibility when they know that if those women have those flexibilities around their time, they are more likely to do more work. It's proven that you overcompensate when you feel like you're doing something and you feel like, oh, well, they gave me, 3 hours to take my kid to wherever. So then they're putting in, instead of that 3 hours that they got, they're generally putting in twice as much. And it just beggars belief. And quite frankly, for me, who doesn't have children, in the Lovelace Report, I think we have over 50% of women that are leaving the tech sector in mid-career or when they get to that stage where it's deemed that they have children of a certain age. I don't have children. So for women like me that don't have children that are leaving, it has nothing to do with work-life balance and everything to do with pay disparity, lack of progression, lack of support when you're in the workplace. So I think that's an argument that needs to be thrown out in this discussion when people say, oh, it's because they want to do stuff with their children. Over 50% of us don't have children. And that number is likely to increase, as we've seen in population studies that women of certain ages are not having children anymore. So that's an argument that I think people have been using for too long. That needs to just be thrown out in the future. And the big thing, when it comes down to allies, I think supporters are really what women need the most in retention. It's not so much as having somebody to mentor you. It's about having somebody support you and champion you. It is to have that person that is willing to put their hand up in that meeting or willing to interrupt when someone's speaking and they are speaking over you as a woman. If someone's willing to do that, that is, for me, a bigger ally than somebody who's just willing to say in a meeting, oh, we need to include this many women in a meeting, but when it comes down to the meeting, actually not saying anything in the meeting to support that woman. It's about those people that are going to speak in the room when you're not there and name you and say your name to get you into those other meetings, to get you into those other positions that include you without you even knowing they're including you. Those are the biggest supporters, the ones that are doing it and they're not being named by anybody. They're not being told, oh, well, this person's a supporter. You might find out 10 years later that that person was your biggest supporter. Those are the ones we need. We need the invisible supporters, but also the visible ones. But we need a lot more people to step up and be supporters. I could go on forever. I mean, we won't name every single point in the report.
Well,
I could go on, but I'm be a little more positive right now.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
it's kind of it's dire when you see how many women are leaving the tech sector, and for some of the most stupid, that's the only word I can think of, stupid reasons, because just someone decided that they just want to cut a budget, and they cut a budget and they've gotten rid of all of the women, and then they go, oh, why is there bias in this system that we're building, particularly with AI? And they go, oh, we can't figure out why there's bias. It's like, well, you cut out anybody who would help you recognize that bias, like 50% of the population.
Yeah. Well, we're going to dive into all of that. And I think we want to kind of just actually, let's play on that allyship point for a second as well. Q, I want to bring you in on here on allyship. How important is allyship, getting the men aligned to support the women, as Suki was saying, and championing you? How important is that from your perspective?
I think allyship is a big part. And I remember listening to a great workshop by Lee Chambers. So Lee Chambers does a lot around Male Allies UK, and he's like one of the world's biggest allies ever. And no, honestly, the way he just champions everyone is just phenomenal. And I remember him saying allyship about it's a doing word in terms of like commitment to action, and that's what I love about it. And I feel like we need definitely more allies, male allies like yourselves on the call today, because I feel like it changes the dynamics of a lot, and it really pushes you. Like, let's say there's times where I felt that imposter syndrome, etc., and it's kind of, I sometimes like getting a balanced opinion. So I would talk to a female colleague or friend, and then I would talk to like a male mentor of mine. Like I get mentored sometimes by a wonderful guy called Vince Pizzoni, who a lot of people would know. And
Vince, great guy.
Vince gets around, doesn't he? He's everywhere, that one. But in terms of, he'll not like me for saying that, but honestly, he's like one of another really great male ally as well, just because it's his commitment to action. And I think as well, time is a massive resource people overlook. Giving someone your time, and where you say like, look, I've got your back, I will support you X, Y, Z. Sometimes money is great as well, but having the time to sit down with someone, talk about something, whether it's a proposal project, and say like, maybe you need to alter it for this, and giving someone the time to kind of give them the wisdom and guidance to help them grow is really important as a male ally as well. And even when someone's relaying something to you, it's kind of being that active listener is so important. So these kind of interpersonal skills come into it. And I think in terms of male allies, they do make the difference in organizations, especially if it's male dominated. And going back to like when my career started, I remember being one of the only women and the only women of color in every single job. And it's changed even where I'm working now. When I first started here 6 years ago, I was the only woman in my team. Now we've got 4 women in the team, and that's because I kept going to my line managers, like giving them headaches about it, going, I think you need to balance the team. No, honestly, and I wouldn't stop, because it's not that I was complaining, it was just that diverse opinion that you get in meeting rooms. You want it to be different. And even you mentioned earlier, Robert, about AI to a certain degree. It's kind of, if you train in something where it's just one lens, how is anything ever going to change? How is anything ever going to evolve? You need different lenses and perspectives.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's bring in Neil and Colm here on this male allyship point, because obviously this is, as you're pointing out, kind of critical to retaining women in tech, because we're still really focusing on retention here at the moment. But Colm, let's start with you. I mean, from an allyship point of view, kind of how do you see the role of male allies, as it were, in helping to retain women in tech? And is there something you'd like to kind of call out in terms of things you might have done kind of to help retain women in tech at some point?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly not taking credit for anything I've done. I think, like Suki said, speaking up and calling out where women are being talked over or their ideas are not being heard is very important. Just yesterday, there was an event, an internal event I was at, and a VP of marketing said that unfortunately, some woman who's on his team is having a baby. So by terming it in that way, it was just, it sounded so, it just was such a terrible way to phrase it. And it's just, I think that's unconscious bias. I hope so. And, calling that kind of thing out is, it's an opportunity. It's easy. It's not, but it needs to be done in the moment, so that others see it. And, you're trying to build a culture of inclusivity and awareness in your job. I think advocacy and sponsorship, mentorship, being available, having a reputation, I think, as somebody who is approachable means that people will come to you. And so just by doing things, you will have greater success by people coming to you to ask your opinion rather than trying to, intercede or jump in. So I think just day to day doing the work to intervene when you see bias is very important. It means a lot to people in the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And women talk a lot about the kind of times when men have spoken up for them in meetings, etc. Neil, let's bring you in here as a male ally. What do you sort of see as the importance of this? And could you just maybe tell us about some of the things you might have been involved with that kind of show what you've been doing as an ally?
Yeah, I think male allyship or allyship in general, frankly, is powerful because it protects your affiliate, your colleague from backlash, right? We can use our privilege, the privileges that we have, to shield from that backlash. And when it's a male ally advocating for retaining women in tech, for example, we cannot be sort of accused of being in it for ourselves, right? It's not going to benefit me directly. I'm not looking after me. So it sort of protects our colleagues from that backlash. I think one example that I could give, and it's not actually directly related to me, but it stuck with me from the day that it happened, was a few years back now, maybe as many as 4 or 5. I was asked to take part in one of our global tech town halls. I think I was doing sort of big cloud migration at the time, and so it was to present on that. And there's a lot of work goes into these behind the scenes. There's days of rehearsals and planning and make sure that we stick to the timings and all that kind of good stuff. And then I think it was like literally a day or maybe 2 days before the event, and our CTO at the time, when he sat in on one of the rehearsals or saw the agenda, he went, whoa. Every speaker on this is a white male.
Right, yeah.
And frankly, I'm slightly ashamed that I didn't pick up on it myself and call it out myself. But he was like, this cannot happen.
Yeah.
It's not reflective of our organization. It's not sending, it's not representing who we are and what we are. So very quickly that lineup was changed. Some, different speakers were brought in. Other people were given opportunity to present. And for me, that was a really powerful example of male allyship, of somebody saying, like, this, nobody planned it deliberately or I'm certain of that. But it was just a really nice, meaningful to me example of how we can use our positions and our privilege to kind of make a difference. And having, female colleagues or colleagues of colour up on that stage just is if when people see themselves reflected in folks that are doing a good job, then I think that empowers those individuals too. So that was a really, like I say, that stuck with me, and it's something I'm very mindful of to this day.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, look, we're going to change tack now. We talked a lot about retention, which is obviously was one of the number one issues in the Lovelace report. I'd like to also think about attraction as well. And Neil, I'm going to come to you actually to kick this off here, because obviously we've got to get women into tech in the first place, and we need to make sure that the way that jobs are designed and job descriptions are done and posted and interviews take place, etc., all of that process doesn't disadvantage women. So what do you see in the attraction process or the recruitment process, and kind of what are the issues there that we need to be addressing if we want to get women into tech as well as keep them in tech?
Yeah, I think there's a few really practical examples that I would give and share. The first thing is thinking about your recruitment funnel, right? You want that to be as diverse as it can be.
Yeah.
I hope we'd all agree, I'm sure we'd all agree that you hire the best person for the role, but you want to give yourself the best opportunity to find that best candidate. So that starts with your channels and how you advertise your roles. We shouldn't just be posting on mainstream job boards. We should be partnering with platforms or communities that support women in tech, for example, Women in Tech.
Yeah.
Right? If we recruit through agencies or even internal recruitment desks, and we aren't seeing a diverse pipeline of candidates, challenge them. Right?
Yeah.
Why am I not seeing a pipeline that's more reflective of the industry? If it's an agency that we're dealing with and we're not seeing that diversity coming to us, then maybe they have a problem bringing in diversity to start with, right? So kind of challenge those groups and improve that pipeline. And when it comes on to the adverts or the job adverts themselves, there's some really interesting studies that show that the language that we use within those adverts really makes a difference to who is likely to apply. So sort of male gendered words, and there's things like rock star when we're talking about coders or engineers, and sort of ninjas, words like dominant, aggressive, things like that. The studies show will put women off, and therefore you're skewing the candidates that are likely to apply. Atlassian, the software company, the SaaS provider that I'm sure we're all very familiar with their products, they identified this and saw I think it was an 80% increase in the amount of female talent they were bringing in over a period of time, which shows that it can be really meaningful. And there's plenty of online tools, some paid for, some free, that will you can plug your advert into, and it will advise you of words that that sort of cross a boundary. And sometimes it can be very subtle. There was one example where the words sort of lead a team, manage a team, and I think build a team all provoked very different responses across genders. Now, to me, they're almost interchangeable, certainly manage and lead. But it did drive a really different uptake in the amount of interest from men and women. And then there's, again, some data shows that when it comes to requirements for a job, right, we've all seen job adverts where there's pages and pages of required skills or whatever. Again, studies will show that women, if they say, I think they'd only apply if they think they've got maybe approaching 100% of those requirements, whereas a man will, if he's got 50 or 60%, he'll think, yeah, I'll give it a go. And so the advice there would be, and this is studies have kind of backed this up with data. So the advice would be really trim down those must-haves to genuine must-haves, and that could potentially see an uptick. And then I think maybe lastly, we've touched on flexible working a couple of times now so far. I think that's another thing that can really help. Equally, I appreciate, and Suki mentioned, right, a lot of organizations directionally are going back to more days in the office and so on. So that might not be applicable to everyone for sure, but if we can offer flexible hours, if there's the opportunity for flexible working, some days in the office, some days out, whatever it may be, just again to create an environment where people are able to manage their home life requirements and the work requirements, then again that can be something that can help So
Yeah.
I think the other thing is not a technique that I've used myself, but you read a lot about is kind of blind CVs, where we take off names, we take off photos if photos are on there, and sort of maybe gender them. Just again to remove. We talked about removing bias, tools to help remove bias. That's potentially a tool to remove bias if you're presented with CV, just the facts, just the experience and the results and the accomplishments, without knowing that if it's male, female, or any other factor, then that can help to remove some bias through the selection process.
Thanks, Neil. I want to bring in Suki. We've got our own rock star with us here. Suki, on attraction, okay, and these kind of interviews and setting it all up so that women actually kind of come in the door and feel that they can kind of join an organization that really wants them to succeed. Are there other things that you'd like to see companies doing and leaders doing to really be attractive places to be able to get women into tech in the first place?
That's a long list. Let's see. As Neil was saying about applications, about the wording of job descriptions, I think, first of all, you have to go back to the mindset, because sometimes you look at the HR team and they think they're being really inclusive, but they have no clue. And so it's often the case because they think, oh, we're going to use this software, not knowing that software in itself is not very inclusive, just the way that it's programmed in the first place. Like, who's feeding into the program that's built that tool that the HR department is using? It's unfortunately, it just seems like there's a mindset shift that needs to take place in society.
Right.
And it's a matter of finding where that inflection point is. And that's what's really hard, because you have children that you really want to influence how they behave in the future, but the people that are teaching the children are not at that point right now.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of where we, as the people in society right now, are able to jump in and say, this is what needs to change before you get that first junior person coming into your company. It's going back to schools and helping to form the way that the curriculum is taught and the way that kids are taught in school about what choices they have, what career progression they take, and how they enter the workforce. Because you get junior people coming in and they think, as young women, that they are supposed to go down this very non-technical route, or if they go down that technical route, they will have a stopping point and they won't be recognized because they're supposedly not technical enough, even if they do have the advanced skills, or if they're the only woman in a particular department. Much of my career has been being the only woman or the first woman. And it's, for certain types of people, it's a competitive advantage, where I've used it to my advantage, because I know that my mindset is different and my thought process is different from the majority of the people in the room. So I know in that room, I am the ninja because I have something that you don't have. 99% of that room, all are thinking one way or leading to a certain area of groupthink, and I know I'm coming in and I'm offering something different. And I think that's sort of the mindset we need to deploy in some women, some people that are considered underrepresented. That's the mindset we need to deploy. The fact that you look at a job description and you think, I need 100% of that to get the job. No, I don't care if you have 30%. This is what I tell the women that I mentor. Just like when they are going for funding for their startup, I'm just like, go for the Earthshot number. It doesn't hurt. If you don't do it, you'll never know. And what's the biggest regret of life is not doing something. So do it. You never know. You just throw it to the wall and see if it sticks. and,
Right.
and
Great.
a lot of the time it will stick.
Great advice there. Aku, I
But
want to
I'm
bring you
sorry,
in.
I just got on a little rant there.
No, this is what we love. We love rants, because this is going to help our panel discussion go like wildfire. And Akua, I want to bring you in because I want to talk about the interview process, because we've often heard that women actually haven't had great experiences in interview processes. So what can we do, and what particularly can men do to kind of try and make the experience of just actually being in the interview more, more compelling, as it were, for women?
I would say in terms of this, because I experienced interviewing someone for my own team recently, it's just in terms of just make sure it's a level playing field, because it goes with what was said by Sikil in terms of women are most reluctant to apply for jobs, apply for something straight away because they think, oh, they don't feel like they have all the skill set. And so when, let's say, a woman comes into an interview, she might be a bit more nervous and apprehensive than a guy coming into an interview. And I'm trying to think of when I last interviewed to actually remember what it was like again, because it feels like it's been a decade or something. But yeah, no, in all honesty, it was, I would say that, yeah, it's just in terms of how you treat the candidates. And also, it's always different when it's in person as opposed to video.
Yeah.
So in terms of the stages of interview, I think that needs to be looked at, because even someone told me recently, I think they did 6 levels of interview for a role. And I felt like sometimes like they need to look at the whole process and think, is it a bit too excessive, or how they actually are testing people as they go through the different stages, because that could deter someone, because they could get to even stage 4 or 5 and then they're just like, oh my God, another one, or I have to speak to this another person again within the company, because it's just that at that point you have to stop and pause and think, okay, what are we actually looking for? What are we actually testing this person for? What bit of the criteria? Because that could be a bit too much, and then they're like, oh, is this like what all processes are like going forward in this company? And so that needs to be reviewed. But I definitely think also the whole kind of accessibility part of it as well. Like, do we make it fair where people can bring their best selves forward to an interview stage? Let's say, for instance, I'm neurodiverse, and in terms of if I go to interviews, it's kind of like sometimes things can throw me off a bit, or it gets to a point where I'm so nervous, I don't want to make eye contact. So the fact is, are we putting in measures to allow people to be free in interviews and also support them? And also prior to that, HR, are you asking questions like, definitely, like, what can we do to support you? Any accommodations, any additional requirements you need? That's so important as well. Because let's say, for instance, if an individual was autistic, I would say that it would be a bit more difficult because of certain cues when they're in the interview stage. So we have to make sure we make it into a comfortable and friendly environment. Even things like lighting, things like that in the rooms. We sometimes overlook little practical things, but that makes it a comfortable experience when they come into the actual interview space. And I would say even the questions as well. Yes, you want to ask a person about their skill set as well, but the person, like, how would they fit within the organization and the team as well? Because sometimes you don't want the same of everyone in a team. So are you looking for something new and different within your team? So that is a case of what hiring managers speak to HR about prior to when they send out job descriptions. They need to have a kind of idea about, okay, the individuals that they may want to join their team, and look at their team currently and go like, what is my team lacking? What is the missing piece in that jigsaw puzzle? And I think that that's also overlooked as well.
Yeah. Great. No, thank you very much. That's really helpful. I mean, let's change gear now and talk about leadership, because I think leadership is so critical. And the Lovelace Report shows that there's still bias in the leadership pipeline in the UK in tech, with apparently 24% of women who are interested in taking a managerial role say that they're experiencing cultural and promotion bias. Okay, so they feel that their odds are stacked against them here. So Colm, let's come to you, talk about this. What can male leaders do to kind of try and help women get into a leadership track at an early stage, and then kind of developed in order that they can achieve their highest potential in a leadership sense?
I think the bias-free recruitment is important to bring in a pipeline, and then having opportunities for early leadership. So spotting potential in people who can be given opportunities to demonstrate leadership, and having the pathways and having the support to do that, and having people suggest. I mean, this is a lot of times this is done informally in companies. And to put together something that's more formal and intentional, I think is a good step forward. And again, with mentoring, making that available and making it easy, advertising it so that young women who are starting out in their careers know how they can get help to manage their careers and figure out where they want to go and how to get there. And sponsorship goes along with that then. I mean, being given the opportunities and being given the feedback as you go along of, how you're doing. And I think companies need to hold themselves accountable. So they need to look at how they're doing, measure their progress, and think about that on a regular basis of what they can do to adapt. Ask women, what the programs that they're doing, how they are being effective, and be adaptive in terms of what you're learning from the people who you're trying to help, and training for the other management. I think the training on bias and microaggressions, little things that can really chip away at confidence. So eliminating that kind of stuff is helpful too, just to make sure that that's not getting in the way. Because sometimes people are hesitant to bring stuff up because they don't want to be a complainer, and they just feel trapped. So being proactive about getting rid of those kinds of impediments is important too.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Suki, I want to bring you in here because I want to think about this whole promotion and progression. Often women are saying that they're seeing barriers, structural barriers to promotion. And also they're saying they're being assessed differently to male colleagues in terms of, men get promoted for potential, women have to show stacks of actual deliverables to get promoted. I mean, what's your experience and what do you see here as a barrier that needs to be fixed?
My experience. Well, as I said, I've worked in male dominated industries my whole life. So we'll take, for example, when I worked in chemical engineering as a lab tech, and being at a company that was, I think, 120 years old at the time that I worked there. I was the first woman that worked in their chemical lab. So I was the first woman that did any metal finishing. And when I would do something, we worked on aerospace parts and like Harley Davidson and whatever. But whenever I would do something, it was always questioned by the line production, like, oh, is this up to standards? I think they tested every piece that I did at least 3 times, whereas other people would get their stuff tested once. And there were only 3 of us in this lab. And it just turned out that they would do that to me constantly until one day I was working on some aerospace parts and they were flawless, absolutely flawless, didn't need anything done to them. And the actual company, which I can say actually, it was Boeing. So when Boeing came in to look at their parts, they were just doing a sort of a tour, and they came in to the lab and they were inspecting their parts. They were like, oh, these are perfect. And it reinforced that fact that I had to have some person come in from outside the company to say this great work versus the people in the company actually respecting what you're doing. And sometimes it does take that outside influence. If you're writing a report, somebody to read that report externally, something you've done outside the company, and then for them to get that feedback and realize, oh, we have somebody who can do some great work. And it does seem like a lot of the women I know, a lot of the feedback, a lot of the recognition and praise sometimes comes from outside of the company. that's fed back into the company, and that's when they then seem like they're on more equal footing. But
Yeah.
internally, I see a lot less women getting recognized from people on their team. I see people getting recognized, but not as much as I would like to, I will say.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Thank you. That's really really helpful. And I mean, this whole issue of culture and workplace bias comes up. I mean, the Lovelace Report pointed to bias, sexism, microaggressions, exclusionary culture. We talked about bro culture in the opening there. I mean, Neil, I'm going to come to you to talk about culture, really. I mean, what can male leaders do to improve the cultural environment for women coming into tech? And how can they set the tone for inclusive behaviors?
I think setting the tone is exactly right. We have to be, I mean, first of all, we have to be conscious that all of us have biases, right? They're built up over centuries of evolution. And so acknowledging that and recognizing that is an important step. Setting the tone is very important. I think as leaders in particular, we have a responsibility to maybe get comfortable being uncomfortable in terms of calling these things out when we see them. I'd actually say one contrary thing to Colm when he gave the example of the colleague that used the incredibly dodgy language about the pregnant league. I'd sort of call that in rather than call it out. I think I want to educate that person. I don't necessarily want to make like a big public example of them. I don't want them to then get their back up and kind of not be open to that feedback. So I would probably choose to do it maybe in a more private setting and look to educate rather than kind of make an example. And Colm, I hope I'm not misrepresenting you there.
I didn't do that.
I think Robert. I think it was Suki made the reference earlier to women being spoken over in meetings. I think it's really important that we interrupt the interrupters. Right, if somebody starts talking over, well, anyone, frankly, but certainly women, that we say, hey, look, Suki was talking. Can we please let her finish? She was making a great point. Suki, back to you. Go on. Like set the tone, model that respect that we want to have within the culture. Keep a track throughout a meeting on who's getting the airtime and try and make sure that it's equalized. So if we've not heard from Suki yet. Suki, what are your thoughts? Do you have any input into this? Really sort of deliberately give opportunity for our colleagues to all speak. And I think just like normalize inclusivity. Talk about it in meetings. Talk about it in your team settings. Be open about the kind of the education and the journey that you're on yourself. Like, I don't know all the answers. I'm constantly learning as I go. And so be open about that. Be clear that, this is something that we're all doing together and we're all, kind of fighting our way or muddling our way through it. So yeah, just modeling that positive behavior, sort of be the culture that you want to see.
Yeah, thank you. Colm, I'm going to give you a chance here, not just to rebut Neil's contradiction of your point, but also to get your perspective on culture and workplace bias. What can you as a male leader do to, kind of try and eliminate that?
Amplify women's voices. So make sure, like as Neil said, that they are getting an opportunity to speak up and calling out. I use the term calling out, and I guess I don't mean that to be in the moment necessarily in front of everybody. I mean that you make a note to yourself and then you pull somebody aside later and say, this is what I saw. What were you thinking? Sort of have a discussion about, what was in their head at the time. The culture is such a kind of nebulous thing. So it's not like you're writing everything down and giving people rule books, but you're leading by example.
Yeah.
And the hiring and promotion pieces may be more programmatic and structured, but the everyday stuff of setting the tone and developing a reputation. What one person can do personally is develop a reputation as somebody who is inclusive and who is a good leader and who is a good listener. Because that's how you have a feedback loop of figuring out how to get better, because you need to hear from the women in your company and then, figure out what's next and how you can improve, because it's all incremental. It's all making incremental gains over time.
Great.
And celebrating the diversity. I think Suki made that point. It's not enough to talk about diversity or tolerate diversity. You need to celebrate diversity and point out that it's really good that you have people from all of these different backgrounds and that you have such a mix. That is a huge strength, and that you reinforce that idea. And it's about business results. It's not. It's good for our business. I think that's an important message to come through too in the culture.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, because we as ever, this is flowing so beautifully. But of course, time is our enemy.
Suki has a point.
Suki, did you have a point you wanted to make? Go on, far away.
Yeah, because you can have two opposing thoughts in your head at one time. I agree with Neil and also with Colin about when somebody does something in a meeting. I think it's a matter of reading the room at that time and understanding whether or not it would be valuable to say something at that time, or whether or not it would not be valuable. Because I think sometimes things happen in a meeting and it's not called out, and me as a Black woman or another woman in the room may feel like, well, nobody came to support us with that really heinous comment that somebody made. Or something may be said and we may go, they really didn't need to say anything because I think that person knew they were wrong. But it really is a matter of making sure you read that room, sometimes calling it out. It's not a matter of being aggressive and saying, why'd you say that? That was not the best thing to say. Sometimes it's just a matter of just a gentle reminder to somebody like, hey, you might want to rethink what you just said there. I've always found that, killing with kindness, the humor often works. But I have 3 A's, and it is awareness, advocacy, and action. And I'm always about raising the awareness of the people in the room so that if there is a teaching point to be made, it can be made in a way that everybody then understands, so everybody's on the same page, instead of pulling that person out of the room and they may now understand, but somebody else in the room who didn't get that lesson will continue to do that somewhere else because they just thought it was okay. So I think, it really is a matter of reading the room. And as I said, the advocacy point is, when you're going, you're saying, hey, this is not good, and taking that action. So I live by those 3 A's, awareness, advocacy, and action. And I am very much about raising the awareness and just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Makes it a whole lot easier if everybody understands.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing in that.
So I'm done.
No. Thank you for bringing in that. I think it's a great point to add to what we were already saying. So just aware of time and a couple more things to get through. Akua, I want to come to you to talk about policies because one of the things we talked about earlier was whether things like flexible working, taking parental leave. I don't know, for example, are enough men in tech taking parental leave to sort of balance up the fact that obviously it's something that women want to take and companies are granting. So and yet I think we see there's a big campaign. Elliot Ray is trying to get men to parent out loud and get dads to take and they of course dads do. I mean, younger men I speak to want to be more present fathers, and yet sometimes they're challenged within the environment. Maybe the policies aren't there, or the environment's not there. Can you just give us a few pointers on that from your perspective, and then we can sort of round up after that?
Yeah, sure. Even before I go to that, I'm going to cheekily slide this in there because it was based on some that you have to take your shot in life. That's all I can say.
Go on then, Akua.
Yeah, no, because it was regarding how to tackle things head on when it's said in a meeting area, because we've done this thing at LSEG, which has been brought in by our EDI team, which is the EDI fundamentals. So it shows you different scenarios and when to kind of like have that discussion, like do it in person, etc. But there's also that whole kind of line about think before you speak. So is it kind of true, helpful, kind, necessary? And I think that's something that is always in the back of my mind in a meeting environment where there's something that's said, because it's best to sometimes take it head on than to leave it, because then for the individuals happen to, it then eats at them because they're just like, I should have maybe done something. And it's better to be kind of transparent and honest about it. And then now going back into terms of your policies, it's in terms of the parental policy. I've got to say, a lot of the guys in my workplace have been taking it, and they've found a lot of benefit from doing the parental leave, where they've taken like 6 months out and then they've had a phased approach back into work. And a lot of them that I've spoken to have benefit from it, because then they see their young one grow up and or kind of evolve over time, and it's kind of helped them a lot in the workplace. And I think it's a really good thing as well, because it's a balanced approach where, let's say, the two parents take the time off at the same time, and then it's kind of, then they work out the work-life balance afterwards. And it's been really a game changer at ELSA going forward. Like in my team, I think about 2 out of 8 have taken it so far. And I think it's helping a lot of people, also their mental health as well, because then they're not kind of feeling anxious about when they're leaving the office, kind of what's happening with their jobs and other things as well. So I think it's been game changing. I think it's been one of our actual best policies that we've ever had at LSEG, because it was started only last summer. A few people missed it because of the date it started, but for those like recently, a lot of it's been encouraged quite a lot. And also it helps with teams, because a lot of people have been honest with their teams and said, look, I'm going to take X amount of time out. And so it's helped with managing handovers and made a better kind of healthy work environment for all, I would say.
Right. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you. I want to just bring in either Neil or Colm, what your experience of parental leave has been, or anything you're doing or noticing in your organization about the importance of it. Is the tech bro taking time off to have their children, and are they really doing the bit at home to with their caring responsibilities? Let's start with you, Neil.
They better be.
They better be. Yeah, exactly. Neil, what are you seeing?
Well, Akira, I think it's great to hear that it's been such a success at LSEG. This is one place where I absolutely think role modelling is so important. Like, it's great having shared parental leave. It's great having flexible working and so on. But it's also pointless if we don't role model that it's okay to use it, right? So unfortunately, I would have been all over shared parental leave. My youngest is 8 now, so I've just missed it, unfortunately, and I don't think we'll be having any more. But I'd have been all over it. And I tell you, I don't miss a single sports day. I don't miss a single nativity, whatever it may be. I'm extremely grateful for the flexibility that I can take advantage of. And I'm very comfortable being open about that and advertising that it's something that we can all take advantage of. And so I do think, especially with, as you said in your intro, Rob, the slightly toxic masculinity that we see within the industry, role modelling that it's absolutely right and proper and okay to use that flexibility, I think is very important from our male leadership.
Well, thank you. We're close to time, and I want to just kind of get one final comment from each of you, and that's about commitment, because as Suki said, it needs to end with action. Okay, so awareness needs to translate ultimately into action. So I'm going to start with a Colm, and then come to you, Neil, as men who are, I think, are allies and inclusive leaders. What's one of the barriers we've talked about that you're going to focus on personally? We're putting you on the spot here. What are you going to focus on in the year ahead to try and make women in tech, to make it a more acceptable place where women are retained in tech? What's the one thing you're going to focus on out of all these different things we talked about today?
What I can do, I have a position of influence more than I manage a lot of people. So I will work with the women I work with to encourage them give them opportunities, sponsor and mentor where I can, and also spot people with potential and encourage them to to do more, or to ask them what they would like to do, and just encourage the conversation, because sometimes that opens up questions and something that was on their mind, but they hadn't, no one had ever brought it up. So just by asking questions, that can help.
Right. Thank you. And Neil, let's come to you. What are you going to commit to in terms of reducing a barrier to keep women in tech?
The first thing I'm going to do is commit to stealing Suki's 3 A's. I absolutely love that. So,
okay.
Sorry, Suki, but I'm having it. I think, Robert, one of the themes that came through really strongly for me in the Lovelace Report was this notion of visibility. The EMEA CTO for Northern Trust talked about it, and it came up a number of times through the report. And I sort of, as I read that and started thinking about it and researching it a little more, I came across the notion of the visibility gap that exists. If I may, I wrote down a definition of it. In fact, I wrote down 2 definitions because I thought I'd butcher it otherwise. So the visibility gap is the lack of recognition and representation that women experience in the tech industry, or that it's the structural and cultural tendency for women's contributions to be less seen, less heard, and less credited. So my commitment is to do what I can to reduce the visibility gap for the women in my organisation. And I do that by amplifying their contributions, making sure that they're getting due credit and recognition for deliveries and what they're doing, whether that be through leadership forums or email announcements or whatever channels there are. I'll be looking to really sponsor and advocate women to take on high impact roles, high visibility roles and opportunities. And then also working sort of throughout my team to make sure that when we assess performance, we're doing it in a really balanced and fair and inclusive way. And I think what's interesting or important is that visibility is not just about recognition, it's about opportunity. It creates opportunity. When your contributions are seen and they're valued and they're visible, it leads to promotion, it leads to retention, it'll lead to growth, and it'll address or start to address a lot of the challenges that we've talked about today.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to give the last word, of course, to Akua and to Suki. I will start with you, Akua. What's the one thing you'd like to see men doing to make a difference for women in tech? It may have already been mentioned, but just what's the one thing that you're going to be looking for in the year ahead? Akua.
I think in terms of what I'm looking for, I would like to say first and foremost, again, I'm kind of cheeky sliding this in, but women are conditioned to sometimes just be grateful and just know their place and be patient. But yeah, we're not going to excel for that anymore. So in terms of like the male allies, I think, yeah, it's time for you to speak up and use your authority and kind of your power and privilege in the workplace to actually support women and be the voice of change for these women. And if you're not willing to do that, then buckle up and enjoy the ride of what's coming towards you, because like women are not going to settle for any less anymore. And they never should have done in the first place, because they know their worth and they should be valued in the workplace.
Wow. Okay, I love that. Suki, you've got a tough job here to talk us out now with final exhortation for Neil and for Colin and for all men out there in tech. What's the one thing you'd like to see?
Well, many things, but one of the things that I do is what I call sort of legacy planting, legacy seeding. I don't know. I haven't really actually named it, but and it's identifying individuals, young women, young men that are talented or that they know what they're doing. I'll recognize them. Either they might be in university, they may be a junior person in the industry, and then I sort of send their profile to somebody I know that's in a position of power, or just in a position where they are in a company where they can actually help that person in their career when they're younger. And it's just sort of action. I like action in this whole situation, because a lot of people have awareness. They may recognize talent, but they generally recognize talent that looks more like themselves, and they may advocate for that person, as I said, my 3As, and then they're not really taking any action outside of those individual circles. So I just want to see more action from people outside of their close bubble that they can really take and use towards helping young women, young men, just young people, but in particular, as we're discussing here, young women, to help them progress. So what I want to see is more action, because it's always kind
Yeah.
of lacking.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you, actually, for a fantastic discussion. And we could have gone on for a lot longer, I think. But it's been really fantastic. So thank you, Akua, Colm, Suki, and Neil, for your contributions today. And we look forward to the discussion that's undoubtedly going to erupt now on LinkedIn as a result of this. Please send in your comments. Please give us your views. Please tell us what you thought about the comments made and the points that we were discussing here. But it's very clear. The message is loud and clear from this panel session. It's all about action, and we need to start taking action right now. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next time.